Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn McEntee, and we're here for Moksha Canada Foundation. We're talking with Youth Connections Cafe today with a great guest speaker, Lisa Dixon-Wells. I wanted to mention that Youth Connections Cafe is supported through bellletstalk. So we really appreciate bellletstalk. We appreciate Moksha Canada Foundation for allowing us to have a safe space, a platform to talk about matters of the heart that are important to youth, but to all of us in our lives, intergenerational. Youth Connections Cafe is about learning and growing together. We focus on mental health awareness and supports and resources for youth, especially newcomers and racialized youth in the York Region GTA, but also across Canada. And we value our guest speakers that we have from across Canada as well, and we're so appreciative. We do in-person weekly group support sessions on topics related to mental health, physical well-being, leadership, arts and creativity, entrepreneurship, community resources, and much, much more. So we thank you for joining us today. Please tell your friends about us. Follow us on social media, Moksha Canada Foundation. We can provide other ideas about programming. If you have ideas about programming, we would love to hear from you. Alrighty, I'm going to introduce Lisa Dixon-Wells. She is here from Dare to Care, Bully Prevention and Life Skills. And I was fascinated with Dare to Care when I was doing some research. So I really wanted to take a moment for our youth to shine light on Dare to Care and Lisa Dixon-Wells. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. If I can encourage anybody to check out the website. We'll get into that a little bit later. Maybe you can wrap it up our conversation, how people can reach out to you. But I do encourage people to check it out. Lots of information there. So I'll get right into it. Let's roll. Here we go.
That's good.
All right, Lisa. So can you tell us about yourself, firstly?
Yeah, so I am a former member of the Canadian national swim team, which is important in what I'll say in a few minutes, and a former teacher and school counselor in my adult life. And I saw just really a lot of really good kids making really poor decisions that was having negative impact. And it took me quite some time in the early 90s as a counselor to realize that the majority of students I was actually working with were on one side of the issue of bullying or the other. They were either those who were being targeted or those who were doing the targeting, who were doing the bullying. And back in the early 90s, there really was no information, no research around bullying in any aspect in the workplace, in schools, and sports. And I decided to go back to university and do a master's in educational psychology. And my focus was on bully prevention and comprehensive guidance. So, how can I, as one person in a school, have the biggest impact in terms of bully prevention? And from that, Dare to Care, the program Dare to Care, I developed, and it was launched in 1999. We are in our 25th year working with school communities. And back in 2018, this goes back to my athletic background, we actually expanded to work with amateur sport groups as well, which in the last few years has been incredibly important with the safe sport movement that has erupted in Canada. Realizing that, not only do we need to ensure that our kids and our children and youth feel safe and welcome and included in school, but also in the sport realm. The two biggest areas where we have child and youth participation, schools and sports.
That's amazing. So 2018, you had said that sports component was
Added.
explored.
Yes, yes.
Amazing. So you as a person, actually, before I kind of go on to some of the other questions, and you as a person, what you were saying that within the school setting, and then there just weren't any accessible resources, if you will, or training.
There was nothing. There
Yeah.
really, in the early 90s, there wasn't even really research, sort of standardized research around the pervasiveness of bullying. And so that all really started to come out, the research and sort of some talk around the need to do school-wide programming or sport-wide programming or workplace programming around bully prevention. That discussion really started around 1995, 1996, which is when I went back to university to really delve deeply into it.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
But I will add, and just on a side note, I don't talk about this very often, but even though my background as teacher and school counselor presented these cases to me, as a child in school, I was not bullied, but I have never ever forgotten one boy who I went to school with from kindergarten through grade 12, who was severely, severely bullied. But again, nobody talked about that back in my day and age. He
Mm-hmm.
was just seen as the weird kid. And
Mm-hmm.
I never targeted him, but I was one of what we now call the silent majority that watched it. And by being silent, I allowed it to happen. And that has always, always haunted me. And that the memory of this particular boy is what keeps me going, what motivates me to keep going and keep staying relevant and current and finding funding in a very hard area right now. Fundraising for charities is very, very difficult, but that's what keeps me going, is the memory of this young man.
For anybody listening and tuning in, that's an important talking piece right there, that silent majority, I guess, if you will. And that's what you're trying to change that narrative. It sounds like with Dare to Care and the work that you do. Could you
Right.
tell us more? What is Dare to Care then, leading into that?
Yeah. So back when I was developing the program, I realized, and again, partly from experience, but or lived experience at that time, I realized that the only way we really were going to change culture was by educating and mobilizing all the stakeholders within, in this case, in the school. So I created professional development workshops for teachers, for staff, for our bus drivers, any adults who had face-to-face, interaction with the children. I also created workshops for the parents. They're critical in helping their kids become a caring majority and speaking up, or protecting their child from becoming a target in the first place. And then age appropriate, grade appropriate workshops for our kids, initially kindergarten through grade 12. But in the last 10 years, we focused in on kindergarten through grade 9, because we realized that that was really where the early prevention needed to happen. So
Mhm.
yeah, just workshops for all the stakeholders, and then we took that into the sport realm, and we've developed workshops for coaches, for officials, for parents, for athletes of all ages.
Well, that's quite a journey then. And did you find it surprisingly overwhelming, or kind of surprisingly where you're just motivated, energized to kind of get the information out and share
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
that's a very good question. I think I'm forever energized, and again, it goes back to wishing I knew back then what I know now, so I could have
Yeah.
helped that boy in school, and maybe had other students step up and speak up. So I'm very motivated by that and energized by that. Yeah, I would say that is the main thing. Overwhelmed, the interesting thing for me is still, 25 years later, after being embedded in schools and traveling around the country, is still the limited knowledge around bullying, and the number of individuals. And I'd say the biggest roadblock in bully prevention is how often people are misusing the word bullying, or overusing the word bullying, and not truly
Mm.
understanding the difference between what is truly bullying behavior and what is normal conflict. Conflict is normal; it's always going to be there. It's healthy in many ways.
Yeah.
Bullying should never be tolerated, but they're very, very different. And I still, to this day, find that people are confusing the two, and calling normal conflict bullying behavior. And
Uh-huh.
it takes away, when you misuse or overuse the word bullying, it takes away from the seriousness of the problem.
Yes.
And so that's part of what Dare to Care is doing, not only teaching skills and providing support, but that education around the proper definition.
Yeah, and finding the proper terminology as you're talking about, and not misusing the term bully.
Mm-hmm.
because someone may not get the opportunity to express themselves, not being heard, almost like the cry wolf situation,
Exactly.
if it's overused, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Just those layers that you are creating. So if you were to speak to like a kindergarten level, and training as opposed to, say someone in high school in grade 9, what
Mm.
does that look like?
Yeah, and again, great question, because we would fail miserably if we just provided the same material for all grades. Really, kindergarten, grade 1 and 2, we approach it more from good friend, like buddy versus bully. What does a buddy do? What does a buddy look like? What is a true friend? And then we bring in the bullying aspect. Basically the opposite of what a buddy is what a bully does, which is, is always making fun of people, putting them down, not including them. We try to keep it pretty simplistic, but very positive with the kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2. Also teaching them some pretty basic skills on how to assert yourself or stand up for yourself. We
Oh,
find that kids have all been told to stand up for themselves, but they don't know what that means or what that looks like. So they create their own, it means to fight back or it means to yell at someone. So to teach a young child or even an adult how to properly assert themselves, that's a real skill. And I feel like kids aren't being taught that skill. They're told to do it, but they're not being taught how to do it. So we do role plays with the younger kids on how to ask for help and the difference between asking for help and tattling.
yeah.
Asking for help is when you're in trouble and you need someone to step in and help. Tattling is when you want to get someone in trouble. So we talk about the difference between tattling and asking for help, and then teach the skill of how to ask for help and how to use your words, how to assert yourself. And then we take that concept and we grow it for grade 3, 4, grade 5, 6, and grade 7 to 9. It's all the same information. It's just how it's delivered and the terminology that we use. Obviously, when we get into the older kids, really grade 6 and up, we also talk more about, we get a little more specific about the types of bullying and go more into cyberbullying and how to help themselves, sexual harassment. And sadly, more than ever these days, we have to talk about sextortion, which is a
Yeah.
form of cyberbullying, but it has been on the increase. It's increased 88% since 2022. And with sextortion, it's really, and I don't feel like adults or children really understand this until it's too late. It is somebody who is acting as though they're somebody's friend online and using fake profiles, using fake photos. It's usually somebody much older, like a 40-year-old man acting like a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And grooming these children into being friends, and then slowly starting to manipulate them and ask for more and more information, and very damning information and exploitive pictures, that type of thing. And once those pictures are shared, they then start to threaten these children, usually financial threat, like pay me $500, or I'm going to share these photos with all of your friends on Facebook, all of your family members. And these kids are embarrassed and they're terrified. And typically they pay the $500, but once they pay that $500, the perpetrator just keeps going and then ups it again and says, pay me another 500, pay me another 500. And these kids are terrified, they're trapped. And they need to understand what extortion is and know that they need to reach out to adults. It's not their fault. It's nothing they've done wrong. They've been manipulated. And, we talk more and more about that with the older kids. And what's really surprising is that it is, when I think we would assume that it is more that our girls that are getting trapped into sending inappropriate pictures and then being involved in extortion. But it is actually, I believe 92% of the cases in the last 2 years have been males aged 10 to 17. So that's an educational piece that our kids and our parents need to know, that we've started to add into our presentation. So we're always trying to stay current with the latest societal trends and issues. So I think I've gone way off track of the
I
question,
love it. No,
but
yeah, no,
I
thank
guess
you for,
the bottom line is
yeah,
that everything that we provide is age appropriate and
yes.
current with what is going on in society.
Yeah. You know, I'm listening intently to you describing the sextortion part. We have had guest speakers from Laura Safe House for, you know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's a safe haven for someone that has gone through that in their lives,
Right.
usually young women. And also some of our local police and such have helped us in that regard, talking about bullying and such. So all of the things you're talking about, it's so valuable. And, you know, as we're saying here, it's you know, the age appropriateness of everything and the discussion and the talking points are so important to enable and empower people to find their voice,
Right.
not to blame themselves. It's interesting. So how do you get how did you get the staff on board for schooling, and how do you get people like that on board, parents on board, community on board, and what does that look like within the
Yeah.
school setting?
Yeah. For schools to get involved.
Yeah,
Initially back in 1999, when I launched the program, I think there was a real stigma
yeah,
attached to bringing Dare to Care in, because I think administrators felt like then the parents would think there was a big problem.
yeah.
And that's not the case. We are a prevention program. That is our goal, is to, we don't want to go in after the damage is done. So really, that's how we promote ourselves, at early prevention and mobilizing the silent majority into the caring majority. That's what we do. And I found really in the last 10, 15 years that we really haven't even had to do any marketing, that the program's been out there long enough that those in the know what Dare to Care is, and are bringing us in very much as prevention, as part of the school plan for their year. Seeing maybe that there's some issues starting to pop up, and deciding that they don't want to wait until it becomes mainstream news, and harms the reputation of the school. That they're seeing this as a really important part of the whole wellness of the school, the mental health of the school, the wellness, the sense of belonging for all the staff and parents and kids, to feel that this is really a community. The way I always describe it too is that there's a lot of really great programs out there, character building programs and self-esteem programs, and they're all needed, and mental health programs. But to me, the issue of bullying is like a bowl of apples, or let's say mandarin oranges at
Oh,
holiday time, and you get excited when you see the mandarin oranges in at the grocery store. And I don't know about you, but I always look in the box and look at the bottom of the box, because there's
yeah,
always a few rotted ones. And once you have a few rotted mandarin oranges,
yeah,
the rest of the box kind of
yeah.
goes bad quite quickly.
Yeah.
Well, that's what bully prevention is. You can put all the great apples at the top of the pile, or the great mandarin oranges up top, through providing character building and leadership programs in school.
Mhm,
But if you're not delving down to the bottom of the box
mhm.
and dealing with, I hate to call it rot, but that's what it is. It's
Yeah,
toxicity
yeah,
within the school community. If
yeah.
you're not going to that deep level and dealing with that, everything at the surface level that looks shiny and bright and positive, it's really surface level.
Mhm,
There's a lot of stuff going on that's not being dealt with. It's not being, and it feels overwhelming. Bullying is a scary topic.
mhm.
But again, if it's dealt with school wide, and we bring in a program like Dare to Care that can really help the community understand their role in it, understand what bullying really is and what to look for, it's amazing how quickly you can shift that culture and get rid of that toxicity at the bottom. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, it
it's
does.
really, that's what Dare to Care is doing,
Mhm.
diving down to the deep layers where nobody wants to deal with,
Yeah,
and cleaning that up, so
yeah.
that the rest really does blossom, that your leadership programs, your mental health programs all really do resonate
Mhm,
and blossom, because we've dealt with that deep dark secret and
mhm,
down below.
mhm.
And that's the same in the workplace as well. It's same in
Yeah.
sports, really anywhere where you bring a large group of people together. There's always going to be a few who
Mhm,
think it's their right to have power over others, and will use whatever strategies they need to get on top.
mhm.
So that's the dark side of bullying.
Yeah, no, for sure. And actually, I'm sure all of us know what bullying is, but if you were to define it in some way, shape, or form, what would be some talking points there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's really three areas that we use to define, or talking points to define it.
Mhm.
The most common, or the one that's actually measurable, is that the behavior has to be repetitive. So conflict isn't repetitive. It's usually fairly short lived, especially with kids. It's short lived. It can be intense and it can be nasty.
Mm.
And it can escalate into a lot of drama in the school amongst kids. But once adults step in and calm kids down, kids are usually very, very good at resolving conflict. So
Yeah.
it's relatively short lived. Whereas bullying is this incessant and now that we've got cyberbullying, it's 24/7. There's no break from it. It can go on for months and months, years and years and years. So that repetitiveness needs to be there. The
Mhm.
other two factors is intentionality.
Mm.
Bullies are intentional. They won't admit to being intentional. They'll say, I was just kidding, I was joking, I didn't mean it, but their intentions are to harm. So
Yeah.
we need to be very, very aware of the impact it's having on children and youth. So if the impact is that a child's dropping out of sports, or is, all of a sudden having huge behavioral changes or not wanting to go to school, the impact is serious and we need to take that seriously. So bullies are intentional. Their intention is to hurt or harm.
Mm.
And the impact it's having on the targets is, sometimes, absolutely devastating. And
Yes.
then the last factor is imbalance of power.
Huh.
So a bully, normal peer conflict, if I use my hands as a
Yeah.
scale,
Yeah.
normal peer conflict, they're even. It's like a tug of war, this back and forth of chanting and taunting each other, but there's equal power back and forth. Bullying is the individual bullying has all the power, even more so because they look around and they know people are watching and nobody's stopping them. In fact, some are even joining in and making them feel even more powerful. And on the flip side, the person being targeted looks around and sees people watching, sometimes friends watching, sometimes adults, and nobody's coming to their assistance. So this is conflict, equal power. This is bullying. So that imbalance of power. And we can't measure imbalance of power, and we can't measure somebody's intentionality, but that repetitive piece,
Mhm.
we need to be more on top of. Teachers need to have a reporting system. Coaches need to have a reporting system where we can start to see that a behavior is becoming habitual. So that individual, and it's not that they are picking on the same person every day. They might be picking on, somebody one day and somebody else for a week, and then go back to the original person. The point being, their behavior is repeatedly and intentionally inappropriate and mean spirited.
Mm-hmm. And smothering the development of, I guess, of the person, whether it be a kindergartner or someone in the workplace or on a fellow sport member,
Yeah.
not able to be at their full capacity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. When you're focused, when you're stressed about every single day going to school or going to your practice or going to work, pretty hard to really focus on the job, the job that is required of you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I was speaking with someone the other day just about the workplace, that feeling that you get, and or even volunteerism for that matter, working in a space where you're giving up your time. And if anybody's ever walking away with their shoulders down, it's never a good thing,
Right.
you want to be going away with a feeling of feeling good about yourself or contributing and being welcome at the table, so to speak. Um,
Absolutely.
how do
Yeah.
you see that? And it wasn't really one of the questions I had, but how has it changed from the time you started this
Mm.
till present day? I know you mentioned sextortion, but in the same sense, how has it changed the program?
How has the program changed?
Program, but also
Or how
your
is the
go
scope of
ahead.
the problem or the issue? Well,
Both.
really, Ed, what has changed the most is the cyberbullying piece. So, when it used to be that a child or an adult went home from school or went home from the workplace, and at least they had a little bit of reprieve until the next day. Now there's no reprieve. That cyberbullying is there 24/7 for these kids or for these adults in the workplace that are being targeted. There's no protection from them. From the kids' perspective, there's a quote that I absolutely love, and it speaks so clearly to the problem, and that is, kids are growing up on a digital playground and nobody's on recess duty. So they're on their devices more than ever. In fact, cyberbullying has increased, I believe they said 70% since COVID. And it makes sense because we were all forced to be more online more often. And for kids, the only way for them to interact with their friends was through texting and through Instagram or Snapchat, that type of thing. Oh. So we've become even more reliant on our devices. And our devices can record, our devices can remember things, our devices have the power of sharing to thousands of people within a fraction of a second. So the whole issue of social media and internet has really brought the issue of bullying to a new level. Mm-hmm. And I should say this, one of the things I said about whether we can define it as bullying or not is if it's repetitive. Yeah. So if it's repetitive, we need to take that seriously. But when we're talking about cyberbullying, because one text or one post could be shared with 100 or thousands of people immediately, even a one-time damaging post or text, we need to consider that, cyberbullying. We need to deal with that and shut it down here. Yeah. So I would say that's by far the biggest change is this sort of lack of control from all of us in using and monitoring our devices, in making sure we're not, that we have our proper privacy settings in place, and stopping and thinking before we post things or comment or like something, because you're guilty by association if you start posting or commenting on a really toxic post. Yeah, that says something about you. It does. Where do the parents then fit in terms of the education piece? How do you get them on board with that? Yeah, well, I think any parent who has a child wants to know that their child is safe. And so, again, in the last 15 years or so, we've had no problem getting parents involved to come to our workshops, especially when we say we're going to talk about cyberbullying and what parents can do to help their child sort of maneuver that. What parents need to know, again, is what everybody needs to know is the proper definition of bullying, what to watch for in your child, like what are some signs that perhaps things are not going well, and then how to work with the school or how to work with the sport organization so that you as a parent are heard and so that your child is heard. As parents, we get very defensive. I'm a parent myself of adults now, but you get very, very defensive. Mm-hmm. If something happens to your child is hurt, or your child is not being treated well by friends. And we become very protective, and we can go in sort of as mother bear, father bear. And what we really say is, as a parent, you need to go in calmly with documentation, document from as far back as you can, what has happened, who's involved, and what did they do. So, document, have something on paper that shows a timeline that this has happened once or twice. There is history, and then go to the school calmly to work out a solution. If you go in there very defensively or very angrily, it just takes that much longer to reach a solution. And in some cases, unfortunately, the school could actually just see you as the problem and not deal with it. So I know it's hard to do, but the more parents have the knowledge of what bullying is and sort of a common language that they can go to the school and advocate for their child, the better off their child is going to be. Mm-hmm. The one thing I will say to parents too is, if I could give you one piece of advice as parents, is if you really do know that this is a bullying situation. It's repetitive. Your child is very, very unhappy. Insist that the school not sit your child down with the bully to work it out. That is absolutely unfair. That imbalance of power is so great that it's like asking your child to sit down with their biggest fear and to act
Yes.
normally and to speak openly. Obviously, the child being targeted is not going to give their full side of the story because they're sitting beside the bully.
Yeah.
And the bully is going to minimize everything because bullies are very masterful at spinning the truth. They're charmers when they need to be.
Yeah.
They talk the talk. And so sitting them down, if it's normal peer conflict, great, sit them down to work it out, to problem solve. But when it is escalated to bullying, where there's that imbalance of power, never, ever let the school sit your child down with the bully. They need to be dealt with separately.
I love that you mentioned that. Thank you for taking the time to mention that. That's appreciated. That imbalance of power in those talking situations. Have you ever found a bully that you've worked with, perhaps through the years, we'll say, has turned around and become a mentor and
Yeah.
trained? Yeah.
It's interesting because bullies are not born that way.
No.
They're not born with a stamp on their head, you shall be a bully, you shall be a bully. It's a learned behavior.
Yep.
And it's typically learned at home, through the environment nowadays more than ever as well, but typically learned and sort of sealed at home by one or the main caregiver. And so it's always interesting as a teacher or a coach, if you have to deal with a bullying situation and have the bully and their parent in, you see very, very quickly that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right?
Yeah.
So where was I going with this? What was the question?
Yeah, no, for sure. That mentor opportunity for someone who's
Yes,
going to turn the corner. Yeah.
So it's very much a learned behavior that becomes, the longer a child gets away with this behavior, the more solidified it becomes as part of their personality style. So we always say little bullies can grow up to be big bullies if there's no intervention early on. So I would say that we may never change the 2%. We typically say it's about 2% of society who really are what we would define true bullies. And then there's a whole bunch of followers that go along with the bullying behavior, but they don't really feel comfortable doing it. They're the kids at the 10-year high school reunion that feel the need to apologize to people because they never felt good bullying, but they wanted to be part of this certain group that was led by a true bully. So in society, we typically say about 2% are true bullies. It's a very, very small number, but they have an incredible influence and incredible sense of power. We may not change that 2%, but we sure can change the 98% who are letting them get away with it. So having said that, I will say that I have come across a few individuals who would admit to being a bully as a kid, and now as an adult, they've seen the error of their way and the hurt they've caused and have turned it around. But I would say that is unfortunately quite rare. So in the early days of Dairy to Care, we did focus on that 2% to try to teach them empathy and more positive leadership skills and that type of thing. But we realized that in the environment of a small group setting where they were master manipulators and talked the talk, they would look like they were getting it and understanding empathy and the errors of the way. But as soon as they went back to the classroom, they quickly reverted to being a bully, because let's face it, there is a hidden benefit to being a bully in society. And that is you get what you want when you want, and nobody's going to stop you. We could all take on that role, right? And we have compassion, and we're not going to take advantage of people, but there are some that they'll do whatever they can to get what they want when they want, knowing that nobody will stop. So we spent a lot of time trying to change the mindset of the bullies and realized it wasn't working. That really the untapped resource in the workplace, in the sports center, is our silent majority. The individuals who see it, who know it's wrong, but don't know what to do, are scared, are afraid they'll make it worse. So that's really now for the last 20 years, really the group that Dare to Care has focused in on, that silent majority. 79% of schools, workplace, sports are silent majority. We don't want to admit that we are, but we are.
Yeah.
We hope somebody else is going to take care of that issue or bring it up at a staff meeting or something.
Yeah.
So really mobilizing that group to become a caring majority is our focus, and where we've seen success year after year.
That's amazing. Could you speak to the sport world then? What is that like, and presenting this type of empowerment?
Yes, it has been very, very interesting because in sports, there's a fine line between bullying and being competitive. There's a really fine line there. And for centuries, there has been many, many behaviors, not just from the athletes, but coaches, from parents, from officials, from every aspect of sport, behaviors that have become normalized as okay in sports, not acceptable in school, like a coach yelling at belittling an athlete to motivate them. It's become normalized as that's part of sport. And in the last few years, though, Safe Sport Canada, it is a movement that really picked up in 2019 after some pretty severe allegations of Hockey Canada, and then other athletes from other sports started coming forward. And it was clear that there was a lot of behaviors that were being shuffled under the rug, people being paid off, the dropout rate, 7 out of 10 youth are dropping out of sports by age 13, never to go back to organized sports. Like, that's horrible. That's a horrible statistic. And it's not that bullying is at the root of all of it, but it is significant and plays a huge role in it. So that's when we decided, well, we've got a really great program that can be adapted in any environment. And all of our facilitators have just happen to have a background in sports. So it made sense to move into that safe sport movement. But we make it very clear that our expertise is in the bully prevention side of it. We're not, safe sport is also talks about abuse in sport, sexual abuse, physical abuse in sport. Our concussion protocol, having kids still compete when they're injured. Like, safe sport is a huge umbrella. Dare to Care goes in and deals with the bullying side of it, and it's huge. It's a big problem. And I do believe, because of this safe sport movement, more and more sport organizations are realizing the importance of bringing a program like Dare to Care in to create that environment where everybody feels safe and feels included and feels respected. So kudos to the sport organizations. I think we worked with, we did about 230 workshops last year in sports with, I'm going to say over 60 sport organizations across Canada. And this year already, we have 100 workshops booked in September alone. So it has really, really picked momentum. And that's kudos to the board of directors on sport organizations and coaches saying, we can't ignore this any longer. So Dare to Care is just happy to be of assistance in any way we can.
Wow. Public accountability for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
No kidding. Can you remind our viewers again about your sports background?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So it's a long ago, but once an athlete, always an athlete. And so I was a former member of the Canadian national swim team back in the 80s. Now you all know how old I am. And, things certainly were different back when I was an athlete. Like I said, there was a lot of normalized behavior. But I still swim. I still swim competitively. I work, I train with a master's swim club. And we swim, compete nationally and internationally. We call it the old people's sport. The real swimmers are our young ones that are going to the Olympics. I've always very much had my foot in sports in some way or the other, but and have seen the progression and the changes over the decades for sure.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning that. I think it's important for anybody who will be listening and tuning in to just hear that component because you have lived that life. So you have
Right.
seen how things, people, the silent majority, if you will, and how that's changing, right?
Hmm.
So that's interesting. As far as in coast to coast, could you speak to the training and then maybe we could talk about the workplace as well, how you're changing the programming a little bit or evolving the program, pardon me, to include the workspace.
Yeah. So the workspace really, at the beginning, everybody said, "Oh, do it for the workplace. That's where the money is. You'll never have to fundraise. You'll never like they'll pay for it, right?" But again, my heart has always been in the early prevention. So working with children and youth, so
Mm,
that by the time they're in the workplace, they know what to watch for. They've got the skills and everything. But having said that, we do work with workplace culture, safe workplace culture, and it's really what we talk about. As I said earlier, is
yeah.
adaptable, and bullying is bullying.
Oh
It
yeah. Yeah.
doesn't change from one
Yeah.
age group or one demographic to the other. And the way we need to deal with it is the same, whether we're talking about the workspace or sports or the school. So the workplace is there. We
Yeah.
do work with workplace, but that is not where our passion is.
Yeah.
And I'll say that openly. Our passion is with making sure our children and youth are looked after and that they've got the skills so they grow up to be able to create cultures in their adult world that are safe and inclusive and respectful.
Hmm. Thanks for mentioning that because that's really important. If it's a young person entering into the workforce, they can create a safe space. They can be empowered to use their voice, and it's a human right, really.
Absolutely.
Absolutely a human right to
Yeah.
speak, to be able to speak up and create a
And
safe
be
working space
supported, be
and
heard.
be supported. Yeah, for sure. Because our youth start very young working. Sometimes 14,
Yes.
16.
Yes.
And so it's important to be empowered and have the toolkit ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I often refer to the toolkit and you sharpen your tools at different times, right?
Right. And use different, we actually call it our tool belt of skills.
Oh,
And we
neat.
teach the kids, and
Yeah.
at the front of the tool belt are the skills that they're going to need every single day.
Yeah.
So the life
Yeah.
skills, how to assert yourself, how to ask for help, how to avoid or just ignore someone, like walk away,
Hmm.
how to use self-talk to
Yeah.
change your perception or to feel more positive about things. So
Yeah.
those are life skills at the front of the tool belt, and at the tool belt,
Yeah.
humor and own it are two skills we teach, but we say they're at the back of the tool belt because they're not as important. They're not as effective, but there's a
Yeah.
time and a place for them as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
this full tool belt of skills you need to put on every morning when you go out to whatever your world is of school, of sports, of the workplace, have those skills and be confident in those.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing too. This the skill component of
Yeah.
what Dare to Care offers is, I've alluded to this earlier, but we
Yeah.
tell kids to ask for help. We tell them to stand
Yeah.
up for themselves. We tell them to walk away. But
Hmm.
those are skills. It
Yeah.
requires practice and confidence and confidence. So, we need to role play with them. We need to provide them with practice time for these skills so that it just becomes habitual for them.
Hmm. I'm thinking cross-culturally. How does that work in terms of training? Have you found that different when working, with different cultures in terms of, delivering the information?
Yeah, yeah. We always try to be very culturally sensitive and make sure we understand the group that we're working with.
Yes.
For instance, to when we work with Islamic schools, they don't like the boys and the girls being together
Yeah.
in doing group work. So and that's how we usually do things. But
Yeah.
to honor that.
Hmm.
But in terms of the skills, those are important skills, and they may be, looking somebody in the eye is not culturally acceptable in some cultures, but understanding when you're in a position where you're not being heard or you're frightened or you're afraid,
Hmm.
that's a skill that over supersedes,
Yeah.
in this case, the belief of looking somebody in the eye as being disrespectful. Like
Yeah.
this is about power, about regaining power. And it's important, when you assert yourself, if you assert yourself and look down at the floor, it gives the appearance of you lacking some confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So while, again, we try to be very culturally sensitive, skills are skills. And sometimes that outweighs the cultural expectation. And really, I would just say when you're asserting yourself, that's the only skill that I really can see that being where that looking in the eye and looking confident and confident voice is critical. Otherwise, that skill falls apart. It doesn't work.
As far as a multilingual, have you delivered any programs in other languages?
Well,
yes.
Funny you should ask. Our school program, and actually, I want to back up a little bit and say that, COVID really hurt us. It hurts everybody in different ways. And when the schools shut down, after the first couple of weeks, it was pretty clear the schools were going to stay shut for quite some time. And third-party organizations like Dare to Care, it was going to be even longer before we were able to get back into the schools. So we made the decision to lift and shift our in-person presentations to an online platform.
Amazing.
So all schools now, and it was so successful, it allowed us to really go in depth in all these different concepts around bully prevention. Whereas before, when we were doing an assembly or going and working with class, we had limited time.
Yes.
A lot of stuff to get in. We had this unlimited time, and we have all these modules.
Yeah.
And that the schools that were used to Dare to Care coming in person actually loved the online program. We were worried about that because you get used to the in-person. So we are now 100% online for the school program. So schools purchase the program. They have access to all of the modules for staff, for parents, for grade appropriate student modules. They have all of that for a full year. And then they renew each year if they want it, or skip a year, whatever they want to do. That is only in English right now because we only have the funding. It's very expensive to lift and shift to an online world. So that is in English. Our sport program, however, thankfully, we have a bilingual facilitator. He's from Montreal. And so we have shifted all of our training material. It's in person. All of the sports program is in person. And so he's our bilingual one. He does a lot of visits up to Quebec for sure. And all of our handouts, all of our PowerPoint presentations are in French. And that's as far as we've gone in terms of multilingual. And again, it comes down, we're a very lean organization. A very small organization. So we kind of have to pick and choose where what we can do, what is reasonable, and who knows in the future though.
Yeah, for sure. As far as the reason it's in person for sport, is there a reason for that as opposed to the online option?
Well, the online was forced upon us because if we were going to survive, we couldn't wait 2.5 years. So that was actually a bright light that came from COVID because it actually created an even better program. I didn't think it was possible, but we now have activities that the kids can do that we couldn't do when we had that limited time in person. So that's why we chose to stay with the online program with the with the schools. With sports, COVID was long over, and we started very small, and I trained facilitators, and it just started out that way, that we're going to do them in person. But we are starting to talk about creating online modules as well, and having a hybrid approach for the sport program. The school program, we'll see what happens. Again, it's so successful, the online program, and it's allowed us our reach to go far beyond what we could do. I mean, it costs money to send facilitators out to these locations. And schools really don't have a budget for that, nor do sports. But we have a tremendous partner. Bombardier Recreational Partners Products is our sport partner. And they actually, for first-time sport clubs, they pay for all of the workshops and travel subsidy. So they've made it
Amazing.
BRP has made it really reasonable for sport clubs to bring us in. So at this point, we don't feel really a need to
Yeah,
really rush the online modules, but it's certainly something that we're going to consider in the future.
that's amazing. No, thank you for that. Shout out to Bombardier.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm just before we wrap up, we have a couple more questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Well, thank you very much. This is so informative, and I know we'll get great value out of sharing this with our youth as well.
Oh,
The program is very comprehensive. We talked about how it's evolved and grown. Um, I guess where would you like to see it go from here? I know we're kind of talking about it, we're sort of touching on it, but as far as in coast to
yeah.
coast, maybe perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the program and the content itself, I think one of the reasons we're so successful, two of the reasons, is that we have content for all the stakeholders. Not just we're not preaching just to the kids. So that's one of the things. But the other, because we've been around for so long,
Yeah.
we've been able to stay, I would say, ahead of
Yeah.
what society's throwing out there. So, for instance, we were talking about cyberbullying back in 2005, before we even had social media. So once social media and cell phones all became part of our world, we already had that dialogue going. So I feel like we've got this foundation that any new, racism and discrimination, we've added that into our content for the school program and our sports program, because we already had the foundation for that this was an issue that was really, again, during COVID, the hate speech online, and it was horrendous. So we were able to go, okay, this is an issue. It's not going away. Let's add this piece, on discrimination and racism. So I think in terms, like I said, of the content, we're exactly where we need to be. And I think we'll continue to be where we need to be. As a charity, it's always comes down to funding. I mean, that very, very, very well, right? We're all competing for the same funding dollars, and we can only do what our capacity allows, our human capacity allows us to do. I would love to be able to go back to the school program also being in person, so schools can choose. But we need funding to train new facilitators. I would love to have sport facilitators in every province to reduce the travel costs for these sport clubs. And we're working towards that, but it all costs money, and we're doing the best we can with the resources we've got.
Wow. If you were to do a shout out to your team, and perhaps what they bring to the table, could we shine light on that for a moment?
Oh, yes. We are a small and mighty team. It's like the little engine that could, that old book about the little red engine trying to get up the hill. It doesn't matter what has been thrown our way.
Yeah.
We always seem to overcome that very quickly. We're a small group, but a very, very solid team, And we all, our vision is the same. Our mission is the same. And the sense of, accomplishment, the sense of worth in what we're doing, I think is what feeds us and motivates all of us to keep doing and keep striving for excellence. I mean, that's one of our values is excellence. It's always being the go-to program and the best current program out there. Very proud of my team. Small team, but a very mighty team.
Amazing. Wow. And congratulations to you on that and creating an atmosphere where people want to be a part of it,
Oh, thank you.
So
Thank
that's
you. Well, they keep me young.
Absolutely. Very much so. And you mentioned the 80s. I thought, really? What? Totally keep you young.
Been around a long time.
Oh my God. No, it was yesterday, right?
Yeah, right.
Have you had any words of wisdom for our youth listening in, our families, anyone who's listening in about this topic before we wrap up, and then we do a shout out to how people can get in touch with you? What would that be? No pressure.
That's a hard one, but I really want our youth to understand we hear you. We do. We hear you. And this world, we've become far more connected than ever before, but far more disconnected than ever before in many ways. And youth are being exposed to things that they should never be exposed to. And I know it's weighing heavy on them. I know a lot of things are weighing heavy on them. But we hear you, we see you, and I want to say with all my heart, the youth today are brilliant. And they really, truly are the change makers out there. They are the ones we need to be supporting in every way we can. They're positive, even in a world that's very negative. They see what needs to be done, and I believe in them. I do. Like, it's not just words. I couldn't say that 20 years ago. I wouldn't say that 20 years ago, but I would today of this youth. I mean, they're growing up faster than they should.
Yes.
And that's sad. And they know things that they shouldn't need to know or have burdens on them. But I truly believe that they are going to turn things around in this world. And we believe in you. And there's a lot of people and a lot of groups out there that truly believe you and hear you and want to hear from you.
That's beautiful, really. Yeah, no, thank you. Great words of wisdom and insight. Thank you. And if people wanted to reach out to your organization, follow you, how could they do that?
Well, we have a tremendous website, www.daretocare.ca. It's all spelled out, so not the number 2, so it's daretocare.ca. And all the information you need. We've got great blogs on there, lots of information. So on a lot of topics we talked about today. You can also reach out to me at Lisa, Lisa, at daretocare.ca. And I can send you more information. We are on all of every social media platform. Just look up Dare to Care Bully Prevention on any platform, and you will find us.
That's amazing. What an insightful conversation with Lisa Dixon-Wells. Just a pleasure to spend time with you and learning about the program. And I highly recommend you reaching out and learning a little bit more and maybe invite them in, whether it be on Zoom or in person. So I just want to take time to thank you once again. Very appreciative.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for having me. I always appreciate people finding out about Dare to Care and seeing the importance in it enough to have us on a podcast. So
nice. No, it's been for we could go on for days.
Yeah, we could.
Which is great, I guess, in many ways, learning and growing together. So appreciate it so much, Lisa. Want to shout out to Moksha Canada Foundation for allowing us to be here. And of course, Let's Talk for this platform, Youth Connections Cafe. My name is Lynn McEntee. I've been your humble host and really appreciate learning and growing today with you. Thank you so much. Take care and follow us on social media.
Thank you, everyone.